turned around and torched and looked like he was. I don't even think he knew where the heck he was. And to me, it was kind of embarrassing watching that secondary. I don't know why they're not. They're still playing lovey ball where they're trying to go for interceptions and picks, and they're getting a few in some games, but it just doesn't seem like they're putting any pressure on these receivers.
You want to know your telltale defensive stat? Lance Briggs, 3 tackles.
Oh, Urlacher's rolling over in his grave right now.
Well, we're finding out that 55 ain't much without 54.
Nope.
Here's the thing. I mean, the secondary is only going to be as good as the front seven. And if they're not pressuring Aaron Rodgers, and he can have all day with those receivers, I don't care if they're sticky man-to-man coverage, they're going to have a hard time. Mm-hmm. And that's the reality of this defense. I think we need to tip our hats a little bit more to Green Bay, not just because of what Aaron Rodgers was able to do and sort of bring back the offense that I think had been expecting for the past 3 weeks, but we need to give a big hand to the Green Bay Packers defense. I mean, they were phenomenal in this game. They were all up in Jay Cutler's face, pressuring him constantly. They got plays from different players in at different levels.
Well, they made
a defense that was struggling the last 3 weeks, except was it last week or the week before where their defense has been pretty solid? I can't recall if it was. I think it was last week's game. Second half since they've been playing much better.
Well, I don't know if I'll go there. They gave up almost 500 yards. They stopped the Bears from scoring.
Well, that's defense.
I know.
You give up 500 yards, and if they can't score,
they made plays when it counted. Absolutely.
Absolutely, and that's a sign of a really good defense. In my opinion.
Yeah, and they were on the field for 36 minutes. You look at looking at the stat book.
Oh, and they stopped the rush. I'm so sorry. I totally forgot to mention that.
What?
I mean, the biggest thing I thought in this game, even though Matt Forte had, I don't know if it was 120, 130, 140 all-purpose yards, he never saw the end zone. Nope. And I really thought Forte was due for at least 2 touchdowns in this game.
Nope. He had 122 on the ground and another 49 in the air.
170, but 0 TDs?
Yeah.
That's amazing.
It's sad.
I recall they were on the goal line, not far from the end zone, and here they were, and they could not get through. Nope. They could not score.
No, but here they are on the 2-3 yard line, and I think they got pushed back to the 6, and they're throwing the ball.
Yeah.
Cutler threw a little high for Alshon Jeffrey, but Jeffrey's a tall jumper. You can throw that ball high, hit him in the hand still, and. Then there was the play to Martellus Bennett right before the half where he thought he got in and nobody called timeout. They let the clock tick down, so they come away with no points there. It was just a bad game all around. And yes, you look at the stats and they ran up 496 yards of offense. Yeah, but it doesn't mean anything. They didn't get in the end zone.
Mm-hmm.
And when if you're going to get in a shootout with Aaron Rodgers, you can't have any turnovers. There's just no room for error. The Green Bay offense made the margin of error 0 in this game.
Absolutely.
You know what's amazing? And being a Matt Forte fan, he doesn't have 1 touchdown this season.
Nope.
4 games, not 1, not rushing, not receiving. Who in the right mind would?
That's not his fault. That's not his fault.
Oh, no, I'm not saying it's his fault. It's mind-boggling. Someone with his abilities that usually has no problem finding the end zone has just been shut out this year.
It's just, again, it's back to what I started saying. It's sort of the problem with this new modern NFL is they've lost their identity to run the football. Sometimes you got to be at the 3-yard line and say, guys, we're going to score by running the football on one of these 3 or 4 attempts. We're not going to pass the football. Or let's try 3 times and then pass it. I mean, you can't say, okay, 1 run, 3 passes. I mean, that's typically not how an offensive coordinator thinks, but it seems to me they're thinking that way because you just don't see enough of it. And what's strange about it is Chicago can run the football. Matt Forte can run the football. He's proven that. And in this game, he certainly proved it. So punch it in.
Right. It really does boggle the mind. It really was a collapse on all fronts. It really was.
Just the whole season so far is kind of backwards. I mean, going with what Jim said, the 2 games that Forte ran the ball well, they lost. The 2 games he ran like crap, they won. They've lost both games at home. They've won both games on the road. It just seems weird. I don't know. It's a very odd season so far for our Bears.
Yeah. And from a fantasy perspective, just so I could throw that in there, for the fantasygreek.com, keep starting, your Packers playmakers, keep starting your Bears playmakers. Don't let whatever happened in this game cause you any fear. They've still got plenty of good games, and for the Bears, they've still got a great offense. So I wouldn't let it stop you from, suddenly, I should be worried about something in fantasy, because it doesn't matter what the final score is. You could get some good numbers from these guys.
And for more info on your fantasy football lineups, listen to the Fantasy Greek starts and sits in 60 minutes, Wednesday nights at 10 p.m. Eastern on Late Night Sports Radio.
And what's the website?
LateNightSportsRadio.com.
Thank you. Yeah, Steve, I gave Keith a hard time after the last show. He never mentioned the website, and I thought, people may not know where to go.
Yeah, that's a great sign of a true, showrunner.
Tweeting it left and right. Tweeting it left and right. Anyway,
it's like saying, "Hey, let's have a drink," and then you're like, "Where?"
See,
he'll tweet it to you though, so you'll know.
Absolutely.
I'm a digital guy. You guys are analog folks living in a digital world.
Oh, man.
Did you say analog the first time you
said
it?
analog.
Oh, stop it.
I said analog. We're not going there. We have 20 minutes left in the show. Let's try to keep it on the up and up. Okay?
That's right.
Oh, we're on the up and up.
All right, before we get into our picks, real quick, Doug Marrone announces that the E.J. Manuel era is over and Kyle Orton is going to start. Is that the right move to make, you think?
Yes, I think so.
Yes.
That second half, they needed somebody who could throw the football, and they didn't have it. Of their game against the Texans, that second half, they needed somebody who could throw the football, and they didn't have it. And, as I've been saying and talking about the modern NFL, the reverse is true, too. If you're a team like them that is running the football at least as much as you are throwing it, you better be effective in throwing the football. And Kyle Orton has a proven track record, and E.J. Manuel, he's struggling.
Yeah, and I think it'll be the best thing for E.J. Manuel's career. If he takes this as a learning experience, gets on the bench behind just like you said, Jim, somebody that has the experience that he's lacking and learns from it, and then comes back into the starting lineup eventually and is a much better quarterback.
Here's the thing, though. I don't know that I mean, them having done it now, I think it's going to be hard for E.J. Manuel to be a starter again. I think once you've been benched and somebody else put it in your place, I mean, it has to be just the most unique circumstances. If you can think of a quarterback who was a starter in the NFL, got benched, became a backup, and became a starter again, please tell me who it is.
Well, it might be Mike Lennon.
Could be. Maybe.
I don't know. All right, and now it is apparently now officially announced on Twitter after it was announced on Twitter, then pulled back last night, and apparently it is for real now. Dennis Allen is fired as head coach of the Oakland Raiders.
Wow.
That's apparently now official. So I got to thinking about this today. And I don't think the Jaguars are going to make a coaching change because I think Gus Bradley is a good coach. But the Jaguars and the Raiders are going to be set up to absolutely, what's the word I'm looking for? Plunder, loot, pillage a team that desperately wants Marcus Mariota.
That desperately wants who?
Marcus Mariota as their quarterback. Because if the season plays out the way it has so far, either the Raiders or the Jacksonville Jaguars are going to have the first overall draft pick. And they already have young quarterbacks that they've invested in. So they can command a king's ransom in trading that pick for somebody that really wants. Right now Mariota is the top guy. That'll change by May. I get that, but whoever it is, if somebody wants a quarterback, even if they finish 1-2, the second round or the second overall pick is going to have a ton of value to a team that wants a quarterback and doesn't want to wait. Thoughts, reactions, disagreements?
No, I agree with you. And Jacksonville, the one thing about them is I gotta say Blake Bortles. He didn't win the game and he had his issues, but he looked, not too bad for a first start for a young quarterback. So to me, I would agree with you. I think that there's going to be a push for it, depending on how the rest of the season plays out. Because there are a lot of teams that do have the younger quarterbacks that they might try to back. So I'm trying to think of who would be. St. Louis, Tennessee, like you mentioned, maybe not Tennessee though, but maybe a Houston. Trying to think who would be up for that.
Houston,
is the question, Keith, which teams, or are you just generally saying?
I'm just generally saying that the Raiders and the Jaguars are going to be able to make out like bandits by trading that pick.
They should be. I agree with you.
And the Raiders added some talent last year in the offseason. The Jaguars have the arrow pointed up. They could really get themselves in a position to be successful in a hurry if they get the right deal for that pick.
Yeah, I mean, the Raiders, it's mind-boggling because I think on paper they actually have a pretty good team. They don't have a dominant wide receiver, but they certainly have a bunch of young, talented receivers, even though I've seen people say a nice thing on one hand about them and then a bad thing on the other. I'm like, look, you gotta pick, you gotta say they're a good receiver and they're underperforming, or you gotta say they're just a bad receiver. You can't sit there and go back and forth on that. And I think they've got, like you pointed out, they've got an excellent young quarterback that if they've got the right coordinator there is bringing him up hopefully the right way. Could they use a veteran? Absolutely. To sort of oversee him and not Matt Schaub. I think somebody else. But have they made the right personnel moves this past year? I think we've all agreed that they have. Mm-hmm. Is it enough? No, it clearly is not enough. But they still have on paper a lot of talent, and this coaching staff is not performing well with what they've got.
No, I agree.
I mean, you can sit there and say, "Oh, Jared McFadden, he's a bust," which he wasn't 2 years ago.
Right.
Maurice Jones-Drew, he's a bust. But here's the thing: he's been so overhyped by everybody as being the between the tackles running back. I'm still waiting for somebody to say, he's 29 years old and he's at the end of his career, so he may not have much to thank. But nobody's saying that. Right. That doesn't make any sense to me. So, and then where's Latavius Murray? I mean, they've got this young guy sitting there. So if your senior running backs aren't doing what they're supposed to be doing, go get the young guy and put him in there and see what he's got. Establish that running game. We get back to this same point I brought up at the beginning. Stop, play some football.
Well, it's sometimes you can overthink a situation and paralysis by analysis, and you just need to draw it up and just go scrum. So.
Yeah, the good teams, they've got athletic players. They've got at certain positions players that are big, fast. But the good teams also, they're not scared to take on a Darren Sproles, who's, in my opinion, a guy like him shouldn't even be playing pro football. But he is, and he's fantastic.
And he's the free agent pickup of the year so far. Well, before last week, and the San Francisco 49ers dismantled the Philadelphia Eagles offense. Okay, so let's move on to our Week 5 picks as we now look at the standings. I am 37-24. Jim is 33-28. And Steve-O is 32-29. Dangerously hovering above that 500 mark. Okay, so the games that we agree on, we are all picking the Packers over the Vikings. We are all picking the Bears. Oh, I'm sorry, Steve-O, you're picking Carolina. Jim and I are picking the Bears, so we'll get to that in a minute. We're all picking the Browns over the and I'm getting clicked.